Hey guys, Abel here, back with a short video today. Apologies for the poor lighting. I tend to prefer to record these in the daylight because the overall picture quality is just so much better, but I thought that I wouldn't break my every other day video streak, which I'm really enjoying at the moment, and I thought that I would drop a more simple informational video about training frequency. And this is something that I've talked about in the past. You may have seen my review video of the training frequency debate between Mike Israetel and Menno Henselmans. And this time I would like to talk about share my most recent experiences with very high training frequencies. So training more than 5 days a week for a given muscle group and getting in your total training volume for the week that way. And earlier on, my stance used to be that some select few individuals with really robust connective tissue may be able to tolerate this, but for people that are more sensitive on that front, like myself, are just going to break down if they do that. Earlier on, my recommendation was to cap your training frequency per week for a given muscle group at 3 or 4 days per week. And certainly my personal experience was that if I train more than about 3 days a week for a given muscle group, then I just started to suffer a lot of connective tissue issues. However, recently I gave this high training frequency a go again, and honestly I need to say that I need to update my stances on the matter, because what I found is that if you're selecting exercises and you're rotating through different intensities throughout the week, then even if you have really sensitive joints and connective tissue in general like myself, even then you can tolerate really high training frequencies just fine. It really comes down to the fact that if you have certain exercises in your routine that are just not sustainable for you from an injury prehabilitation perspective, then that is just going to bite you in the ass a lot faster. So I gave the example of overhead tricep extensions, maybe even overhead presses could come into this, bench presses certainly. There are just certain exercises that just don't suit me personally. Many people have something like that. And if you're not smart and willing to quote unquote listen to your body on that front, then it's just going to become a lot more problematic much faster, basically, if you're training with very high training frequencies. Because, for example, maybe I could get away with benching 1 time a week, and yeah, it would kind of cause me some elbow or shoulder niggles every time that I'm doing it. But if the frequency is low enough, then I basically may be able to recover from it by the time my next benching session is rolling around. So being really smart and flexible with exercise selection, not getting married to a given exercise because that's one of the old standard bodybuilding movements like the bench press, or maybe for you it might be the squat or the conventional deadlift, whatever it may be, is really, really critical. I would also say, and this is not something that I'm super confident about, but my recent experience was that just like your nervous system has to adapt to a certain exercise, basically you need to adapt to higher training frequencies. And that might be actually a good argument to not jump into training 6 days a week for a given muscle group from 2 times a week, but gradually increase your training frequency and let your body adapt to it, basically. So what I found is that by training this way now for a while, for 1 or 2 months already, my body is basically adapted to this way of training. And earlier on, whenever I tried it, I was always running into these joint issues, and probably that was because I increased my training frequency too quickly. Now, a couple of things that you should know about training very frequently. One thing is, and this is basically the benefit and the biggest potential downside of this, is that it's really way too easy to increase training volume way beyond the point of reasonable. Now, at the same time, that is perhaps its biggest benefit as well, that it's just really easy to efficiently and easily increase your training volume without having your sessions run too long or having them be too fatiguing at any given time. So, for example, if you're doing 9 sets for, let's say, your chest, and you're training your chest 3 days a week, if you add in another session, it's really easy to bump that up to 11 or 12 sets. But you have to be careful, because again, if you're just adding in a whole bunch of more training days and you don't adjust your per session volume, then it's really easy to way overdo your total weekly volume. At the same time, though, I would say that if you want to experiment with some higher volume phases or protocols, then a high training frequency is a really easy and efficient way to do it. And recently I've done some experiments where I pushed my volume up pretty darn close to 30 sets. Sometimes actually I went beyond 30 sets. And by training, 6+ times a week for each muscle groups, it was really easy to do that. And your training session never feel that crazy hard individually, and you don't need to be in the gym for ages at any given time if you want to do a lot of volume for any given muscle group. So this might be something that you could try out for specialization cycles, for example. If you really want to blast a given muscle group for a shorter period of time, really bumping up the frequency is a really easy and efficient way to do it. I would also say, and this is something to keep in mind, that one reason why you might want to be gradual with increasing your training frequency is because simply by adding in another training day, or even actually splitting up your current volume to more training days, inherently the total amount of tonnage you're going to be lifting is going to be higher. Because if you were doing, let's say, chest training 3 days a week, and you split the same amount of volume up to 4 days a week, you're going to do more reps, or you're going to be able to lift more weights for a given amount of reps with the same amount of volume. So your set number might stay the same, but the total tonnage will still increase, which of course means increased training stress, increased recovery demands, increased risk of injury, and the whole 9 yards. So you want to be gradual and careful with this, and you don't want to go overboard. And again, it's really, really important to keep in mind that the more you're pushing the envelope in terms of volume or frequency, you really have to be smart with exercise selection, and the old cliche of leaving your ego at the door is really something that you need to take to heart in that context. Because again, if you're insistent on benching heavy, squatting heavy, deadlifting heavy, whatever, all the time, then it's going to break you for sure. Like I said this before, my training sessions are often not super exciting these days. I'm doing a lot of high rep pump work. As I was going through the SSD cycle that Børge Fagerli put together, originally I would have started at like 15 reps and gradually I would have gone down to 5 reps. I often started now at like 40 reps, and maybe over time I went down to 15 reps or something for certain muscle groups, not on all. But for my triceps, arm work is something that I'm really hesitant to go any heavier than maybe 15, 12, maybe 10 reps. So you have to be really conservative, and you need to have an advanced lifter's mindset. Basically, even if you're a new lifter, you have to adopt the mindset of someone who has been in this game for a long time and really knows his body and is super conservative with how much he is pushing himself at any given time. So you have to play it smart, you have to play it conservative, but if you're smart about it, then actually really high training frequencies can be really beneficial. And this is something that I benefited a lot from recently, I think. I definitely think that I made some significant progress, and I can't wait to actually see the fruits of my labor when I next do a fat reduction phase and get rid of some of the extra fluff that I put on intentionally throughout these last couple of months. But so far it seemed to be working out fine. And the last thing, I hammered home the point of being conservative with exercise selection and intensities, but also just exercise variety in general. So you want to be rotating through much more exercises in general than you would want to if you were to train 2 times, maybe 3 times a week for a given muscle group. So right now, for most muscle groups, I have 4, sometimes even 5 exercises in my program. And this is simply there to avoid or prevent running into overuse injury problems. Because if you're stressing your tendons in the same sort of movement patterns all the time, then it's not a guarantee that it's going to run you into overuse injury problems, but each exercise has its inherent limitations in terms of its range of motion. And it's very rare, even if some exercise feels like it's perfectly fitting for you, even then probably it's kind of forcing your body in some sort of a movement pattern, which is just not ideal for you. And if you're selecting enough exercises, then basically you're going to autocorrect for these slight limitations, which are not really going to run you into trouble at any given time. But again, it's in the long term where these niggles and chronic aches are going to develop. And this is something I talked about not long ago. So those would be my brief thoughts for today about training frequency. I think it's worth giving it a go at least one time in your training development. I'm glad that I gave it another go after kind of giving it up on it some time ago. And this is what I found. I hope this short video was somewhat informative. Let me know what your thoughts are and what your current training frequency is, and if you ever experimented doing any more frequent training for any given body part than maybe 4 days a week. Because anything over 4 days is considered to be pretty damn high training frequency, if you ask me. So that's all I had to say for today. Subscribe for more content like this. Like the video if you liked it. Dislike it if you disliked it. Troll me, I'll troll you back. And with that, see you next time.